All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we all enjoyed our break. But I am excited to announce our next presenters. We are going to have the Salt Lake County Youth Services Youth Action Board, presented by Minna Copeland, Yisei Burke, Cameron Thompson, Megan Martinez, and Natalie Clark.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. We are the Youth Action Board. This is a lovely little compilation of some of the pictures of our work together. These are our members that we will introduce shortly. I'll introduce myself. My name is Natalie Clark. I use she, her pronouns. I am the foster care liaison for the Youth Action Board, as well as a co-founder of the 1999 Collective. I spent 6 years in Utah's foster care system, and I am elated to be back here because I was one of the first presenters in our policy summit last year, and these young people are absolutely incredible, and I'm really excited for us to carry on this tradition. So I just want to kind of give you an idea of who we are as the Youth Action Board. We are a community of young adults here in the Salt Lake Valley region that have experienced system involvement with DCFS, juvenile justice, and youth homelessness. Our main goal is to advocate for other young people and youth experiencing homelessness and system involvement in the way that we have, and advocate for young people to be involved in every part of system involvement, whether that is the creation of the policies that are made, how we actually work with young people one-on-one, and the services that are created for us, and to make sure they're created by us as well. The purpose of our Youth Action Board is to have youth advocates from the community to bring youth perspectives and expertise to the youth services to promote continuous quality improvement. And our vision. In collaboration with the community, our vision is to prevent and end youth experiencing homelessness by housing that is supportive as well as equitable. We want to create pathways to employment, education, and leadership to ensure that youth experiencing homelessness is brief and non-reoccurring, with an emphasis on recognizing the systematic failures for youth of color and youth identifying as LGBTQ Two-Spirit plus. And I will bring our Vice President Cameron up to introduce the flow of our members for the Youth Action Board.
I'll start with the members not present. AJ Perez, she is acting as a member of the YAB, and Mina Rivera, which is also another part of our YAB members. And then to introduce the members that are here, to start with Yisei Burke, our president of the YAB, and then we have Megan Martinez as our past president, kind of here for guidance, and then we have Natalie Clark, who is here as the lived expert liaison for our YAB, and then you have me, the vice president, Cameron Thompson, and then
And so like you said, my name is Megan Martinez. I am the past president of the Youth Action Board. I am now currently the co-chair of the Client Focus Core Function Group for the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, co-chair of the Youth Experiencing Homelessness Task Group, and chair of the Lived Expert Task Group, as well as a co-founder for the 1999 Collective. And so here you see how we are integrated into the coalition now as a Youth Action Board and bringing in that youth voice. And so our Youth Action Board essentially lives under our Youth Experiencing Homelessness Task Group, which that lives underneath our Client Focus Core Function Group, which is then a part of the steering committee and our YHDP ranking committee, which will be reviewing all the applications that are due today for YHDP. Next slide, please. And so I want to give you a little history and context of how we got to this position of being able to be a youth voice and a youth leader on the COC itself. It started in 2020 with our first application for the Youth Experiencing Homelessness Demonstration Program, which is a HUD grant for youth experiencing homelessness. It's one of the first. And so when we applied for that, they reached out to us as a Youth Action Board, and we were still very new and still very small and had just started, and we applied and did not get it clearly that year. But that opened up the door to have further conversations as to why youth need to be involved in the conversation of homelessness, because when you focus on the youth, we can prevent the bigger issue. And so that opened the chair to allow me to become the first voted in lived youth expert advisor to the COC with voting rights. And so I was able to inform the steering committee as a lived expert. It was also the first time we'd ever had a lived expert on the COC steering committee with voting rights. And so to be able to inform those that are directly affecting this population on the best practices and how to really engage with youth and to prevent homelessness in the first place. And so during that time, we then were able to apply again for YHDP this year. And with that, it came with the stipulation that we had to have at least 2 members on the steering committee with youth voice. And so to work with that, I was able to be voted in as now a co-chair of a core function group with voting rights. And we were able to write into our bylaws that the YAB president or a member of the YAB would now be that youth lived expert advisor with voting rights. It is in our bylaws, it will not change, and we will now have that youth voice sitting at that table all the time. I'm gonna pass it over to Esau.
Okay, my name is Esau Berg. I am the president of the Youth Action Board. I am here to talk about what are we doing now. So in projects in 2023, we secured the Milestone Housing Office of Homeless Service grant award $2.9 million, which will serve 18 youth at a time. We also got the YHDP $2.78 million for homeless youth only. And we also did a youth focus group where it was a 3-day focus group where we went to different programs, Volunteers America, But Bailey, or any program that are serving homeless youth. We're asking the youth, what is working, what is not working, how can we help you, and how can we make the program a little bit better for serving youth. So these are just the projects that we did in 2023. Projects in 2024, we did our RFP back in March, and we did a presentation to the Salt Lake Valley Youth Needs Assessment. And we are now working on the coordinated community plan, and we already did our governance structure. So yeah, next slide. Our biggest project of the year, as I said in the previous slide, in September 2023, Salt Lake County government was selected as a YHDP community and received $2.7 million. Yeah, I am very proud of our Youth Action Board, and we are able to serve a lot more homeless youth, and by empowering. We are in the RFP application now, so we don't have a final decision yet, but we are prioritizing rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and permanent housing for those youth. And how can we empowerment the youth voice is we have the ranking review committee and the YAB and the adult mentor and the community partners that are not applying for OHDP. So these are the reasons, these are the things that we are empowering the youth voice. Next, please. Again, yeah, okay. And then next, and then what's next, Cameron? And I will give it to him.
I watched for the chords that time. Not the microphone. All right. Let's get this thing back in here. All right, so what's next? As far as the future holds, a few things is during my presidency, I want to make sure that the YHDP, whatever is funded, whatever we decide gets the money, should be held up to standards, and that should be passed through my presidency and further down the line. And as far as being on the COC, once ESAL relinquishes the position and I am on the COC, I look forward to being the youth voice on our COC to ensure the youth homelessness is brief and rare. As a president, I want to advocate for the youth voice and lived experience, and for that to be the head of the discussion and nothing less. That's about it. Thank you, fellas.
Yeah, it's a good one. Can you tell us how Youth Voice influenced the award of the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project?
Can you rephrase that?
Why did the Youth Action Board's role on the COC matter for getting a youth demonstration grant?
So it mattered, one, in the fact of just the application was required to have at least 2 to 3 voting members and voices on our COC steering committee, but also as well as we were the ones that really actually wrote the grant in collaboration with our community. We wanted to ensure that this project was being led by youth voice and youth experiences, and that's what was going to our government, and hearing what the reality is that we face and what we hope to accomplish with this money.
And I would just throw in there that youth are just like kind of cooler than anybody else. And so the first year that it was applied, young people were not involved in that at all. And as soon as young people were, they really saw what we were working with and what we're made of. And I think that's something that you cannot deny is the transformative power that comes with bringing young people with our creativity and our style. I think we bring something special to the mix.
Hello, I'm Lauren. I just want to say this is like awesome, and I'm glad y'all have it packed tight and good. But I'm doing the Youth Futures Board in Ogden, and I want to know what are your advice? Something that you ran into that maybe you could have told your later self.
As one of the first, I think the thing I am hoping that I do and will continue to do is really preparing those who are coming next, right? Being the first one to do it, you have to kind of deal with all the experiences and all that pressure and like craziness of being in a space you've never been in before, but then that allows you to have the opportunity to then reflect on it and give them advice on how to do it better. And that way they can take it and be their own. That was the biggest thing is, as I was handing off this YAB to this next presidency, was I didn't want you to do the same things I did. You know, things need to change and they need to grow. And so I wanted to ensure that they understood that and could take that, but right, there's also things that the history includes that you have to understand as well. And so giving them that history and that knowledge to be able to engage in these places effectively, but then also allowing them to own their own power and their own voice to come into this space.
Sweet.
And I would add, there's a couple of elements that are really important to include. So that mentorship, having young people that have started it and pioneered this work, being there to support our newer members that are joining in, providing that historical context and that guidance and that mentorship. It's not just about knowing these crazy acronyms or what's happening. It's about feeling what's going on, and she has seen us for what we've been through and what we go through, and she guides us along that emotional journey in that process that I think is truly invaluable, where you really have to create that team. I view all of these young people as my chosen family, and I think that we wouldn't be able to do the work we did unless that bond was facilitated and supported by Salt Lake County in the way that it has been.
Sweet. Awesome.
So I'm hearing you talk about the importance of lived experience. And so with that, how are you getting the lived experiences of homelessness youth on the board itself? And then with that, how is homelessness being defined in this policy?
Homelessness, we're defining it as HUD's definition of imminently or literally experiencing homelessness. And so that's the definition we use. And then I'm gonna pass it to Esau on recruitment.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, just
Sorry.
how are you getting different perspectives of lived experience on the board itself?
Okay, so for recruitment, oh my goodness, I'm gonna break this. Okay, so for the recruitment, we are just talking to different programs like VOA, Milestone, just talking to the youth that are in the program saying, hey, we're the Youth Action Board, this is what we do, and if you're interested in, you can come to our meetings. And it's first month of first Friday of every month. I almost messed that up. And it's open meeting, so anybody can come. And if you are interested, you can fill out the application, and then me and my vice president will look over, and then we'll decide if you are fit for the program, or and if you want to join, then you can just join. So yeah, so that's our recruitment program. I typically want them to come to a meeting at least like 3-4 times before I get to the interview program process, just to see how they fit with the program, to see if they are actually motivated and wanting to make a change in their community before I'm moving forward.
Thank you. And then just another question I had. So super exciting. You're awarded the $2.78 million through the YHDP. Where is that going? What are you putting that towards? And how are you empowering youth with that funding?
Yeah, of course. So YHDP is strictly for housing for youth experiencing homelessness. And so the applications are due today at 3 p.m., which I know is probably last minute for some of everyone. But what we are prioritizing, because we haven't dedicated that money quite yet, but we are prioritizing permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. So anything that really falls under those, but under direction and through the advisement of us as a youth action board on actually what are going to be the best practices in those spaces. As we know, we have some programs, but they can always improve and be better. And so we as the Youth Action Board will be directing these communities and these partners on what's going to be the best for these youth, as well as engaging the youth themselves on what they want and what they deem is going to be most important for them on their path to housing.
Thank you.
And something I would like to add to that is I think there's some really telling evidence to what we've done to bring youth into the conversation of homelessness that was never done. So historically, in our homelessness state strategic plan, youth homelessness is only mentioned one time. This year, we have got youth homelessness mentioned 11 separate times throughout that entire strategic plan. This is unheard of, y'all. This is something that does not happen, and I think that's really telling to why the expertise really matters. Years and years and years of a strategic plan being built, youth have been left out of the equation, but as soon as you get young people with that lived experience to the table, we're all over that document.
So I'm just a little bit interested in like how this position was established, like the youth position with lived experience. Like what caused the COC to need that or to be pressured to having that? And then what advice would you have for more organizations and more youth fighting for those positions to be implemented into other organizations that deal with other social issues and things of that nature?
Y'all got some loaded questions.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So essentially what caused like that breakthrough of that important position of a youth representative?
We'll pause there.
Yeah.
And then we'll answer the second one after that.
So, I mean, just in the fact that we were able to receive YHDP, that really just even opened that conversation as to why, because when we got the feedback for that grant, right, it was saying that we as a Youth Action Board were just not involved enough as lived experts or as youth. And so I think it was also nationally, right, at the time of like this big push of just involving lived experts in the first place. And so I think when I was added onto the COC, I really wanted to be very intentional of ensuring I wasn't going to be tokenized in this space. And so I came into this space very open-minded and willing to just learn everything there is to know about the homelessness system and then inform it from that perspective, as well as being able to bring other lived experts such as Esau or Natalie in the lived expert task group, because then it wasn't just one lived expert trying to speak to an entire system of experiences. I now had a whole group that I could rely on to bring that information back to the whole. And so I think that's what really pushed the COC to understand that we can make the changes and that the changes actually happen when you involve lived experts and that youth voice, as we can clearly see within just a year.
Thank you. And then the second part, you kind of alluded to this, but it was just what advice would you have for other youth to put pressure on other organizations to include like a youth representative position for other societal issues?
Don't wait, don't hesitate, make it happen, whatever resources are necessary. We believe absolutely always, number one and foremost, is you always pay your young people with lived experience for any work that they are doing. We are equally professionals in this world and in this field as any of the people sitting across from us in this room today, and that needs to be valued and highlighted as important. And providing that support to not just do the work, but to get to know the young people and create those relationships outside of the semantics of the work we do, because it's the relationships we have with each other that make us able to do the work that we do. And don't wait, don't wait, don't wait. Get them involved.
I would just add to that, as well as my advice necessarily wouldn't be for the youth engaging in these spaces. It's actually going to be for the providers themselves. You are the ones that help us open up these spaces. You're the ones that can back up our stories and back up our validity beyond, right, the fact that yes, we are lived experts and our experience matters, but there is that professional piece that plays a major role in making that change. And so when you all invest in us, we will invest in you.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect transition to the question that I was going to ask too. So when thinking about the providers and the steering committee, I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about the practices or protocols or those strategies that they use to make sure that your voice and your vote was not only like an equal vote and influence, but an equitable vote and influence. Because it's one thing to just have a seat at the table, but it's another thing to be heard at that table as well, to the same degree as the other members. So I was curious, like, what did they do that like keeps you involved with them that other people should learn from?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I would say it took me a year to even just understand the entire like homelessness system and where we as a COC played a role. And then another big piece was that staff member that took me under their wing during that time of like, I'm gonna push you forward. I'm gonna always call on you in case you have anything. Like I'd raise my hand in a WebEx meeting and like everyone would just like ignore it. And then she would be like, oh, nope, this one has, like Megan has her hand raised. Like we need to make sure we take the time, right? And so it was really that intentionality of the staff supporting the COC to open up that space and say like, no, like she's got the ideas, she has the voice, we need to listen. And I think that's where it started. And then just as a lived expert, just really just driving it in of like lived expert, listen, like we have the voice. And so I think that's kind of what opened the doors. And I would say today being able to be now a co-chair of like a core function group has also added to that of like, oh, we're managing a core function group, so your voice definitely matters at this point. And then once again, that lived expert task group just added so much more openness to the community of being able to bring in the entire homeless community beyond just youth. So,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Everything that I've heard so far is honestly so inspiring to me. Everything that you're doing is exactly what I think we all try to say in our introductions. The work is clear, it's working, and you're really showing the power that youth have in society. And so I would just like to ask, how are you all involved in the implementation and especially the evaluation of the policy that you're helping to draft? And are legislators and policy drafters really asking you for your expertise in how the policy is working?
okay, I guess that's me again. Yes, is my answer. I know being able, a big thing was that we as the Lived Expert Task Group were able to present at the Utah Homelessness Conference this last year as a Lived Expert panel. And so I think that really opened up the minds of like, we have such a different perspective of the reality of the system and how to change it. And so to me, just being able to speak to a wider group really opened that mindset of, we had other COCs like Balance of State and Mountain Lands reaching out of how can we create this in our space and how can we create it equitably. And so I've been working to engage with those communities on how to best embrace a youth action board or youth voice on their team, one of those coming from equitable compensation, because we deserve to be compensated for our work, because this is our life that we're expressing every single day, and it's brought up trauma all the time, and that takes a toll on you. And so I think that's the biggest piece. And then I feel like there's another question in your question that I'm missing.
I think you pretty much answered
Okay.
it. Thank you.
And I think a piece of that, you asked about how state policymakers and legislators are asking for our input and our value. I think that's really shown, and we've actually had a few members of our Youth Action Board, including myself, involved to our governors and mayors task force, and we are heavily implemented in winter task force response. So we have a code blue that's been implemented when the weather gets cold enough. We have a certain emergency shelter response that we've actually been a part of drafting all of the legislation that goes into that for 2 years in a row. This is our second year being involved in that. So I think it's a slow experience, right? It's not perfect. It's rough around the edges, as it always is when you're trying to incorporate young people with lived experience into these governmental and legislative sessions. But I think it's a learning process that they're committed to, and we're committed to teaching them how to authentically engage us in the way that matters most. And we're going to continue to do that.
That's amazing, thank you. And just one kind of follow-up. What does the Youth Action Board look like now? Like, how many members do you have? What is it mostly comprised of?
Youth Action Board looks like we have 7 members. Yeah, so there's 2 are missing today, and we also we have 3 missing today, and then we have 1 adult mentor, Minna Copeland. She's not here today, and Jessica Macon is on our Youth Action Board as well as a adult mentor. What was the other question?
Like, well, I asked what is it mostly comprised of, but I think we got a pretty good introduction.
Yeah, so it's comprised of young people with lived experience. All of us have experienced some form of homelessness in our adolescence or experience of youth, and then as well as system involvement with juvenile justice, Department of Child Family Services. So we have kind of a broad array of young people that have used homeless services from different providers throughout Salt Lake County as well. So we have like a well-rounded perspective of, well, I stayed in these shelters when I was a kid. I stayed in these shelters when I was a teen. So we've got a pretty well-rounded view of different services that have been utilized in our community to get us to where we are today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and like I just want to say, like, we coming from different backgrounds, but we all come together and share our stories and making a change in the community. I think that's what's really important on the Youth Action Board.
Definitely. I think we can turn it over to audience questions now.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, so I think one of y'all, I think it was Nat, asked earlier of how do you make sure the programs aren't performative? I know you guys spoke about the Youth Action Board was really pushed when the new YHDP funds came out and having more youth involvement. What was the process like to make sure that y'all had the education and information to show up in those spaces, feeling confident, and making it so that you weren't just sitting in that space, but having the information to really push things forward and have your voice heard?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first it's my past experience, right, of having been in the COC and having written the YHDP grant before, and how to really inform that we needed to be more involved in this space. But also taking the time as a Youth Action Board and with our older adult mentors to, as Natalie put together, she put a list of acronyms throughout YHDP together because there were so many that we kept forgetting, and trying to understand that. So it's being able to provide the time to really put it into words that we can understand, right? Because it's such a big concept, thinking of an entire state or even an entire county of homelessness and how to address that and how we as a community can do better. And so it was really bringing it down to a vision that they can really bring up in their own minds of this is possible and we can do this. And opening up that space to ask as many questions as you want. I don't care what your question is, just ask the question, because I want you to be as informed in this process as possible, as well as expressing our mental health needs. That was a very big piece during the YHDP process and even in this COC process, because we are relating on our own trauma and our own life experiences. Of course, that can bring up so many feelings and things, and so it was allowing the space to be, I'd be in meetings and pacing a room or laying on a floor because I was I just need a minute, and allowing you to have that space, because we can understand all of this information is very overwhelming, even to an older adult, let alone a young adult. And so just allowing them to have the space and letting them dictate what that space is and what it looks like. It really is putting everything back into the hands of the youth and allowing them to choose.
I'll warn you, sometimes that looked like very long meetings that went beyond the time passed, and a lot of snacks and cries and giggles and some bumper cars. So you gotta have fun and get creative with it, right? It's not all work. We have to have that time to learn.
Thank you.
Would the presenters like to have any final words?
We just have a slide with contact information. If you want to put it up, we have contact information if anyone would like to get in touch with the Youth Action Board for anything. And we have a gift that says, "Thank you, I love you," so I'd like to show that too.
And then I just would love to close it out and just say thank you all to being a part of the summit, and thank you to our youth panelists of really showing what leadership looks like and how to inform these policies and how we can all collaborate better as a community, because that's what really shows and that's what really makes the change, is true and authentic collaboration. And so I want to also thank you all for being here and being open to learning and understanding why youth lived experience and just lived experience in general is so important to be engaging with, because it really makes the change.